Dean. You will have noticed in your program today that the question posed after to be or not to be was, is it good for culture, yet a hindrance for commerce? I'm sure many of us would hope that's not an either or. And we're going to hear from our panellists with some opening comments and then open this up into more of a Q&A style forum so that people have opportunities to make comments, ask questions, and hear from our panel of experts. And so we'll throw across to Russell Thomas and hear some of his comments.
Hi everyone, I'm Russell Thomas. I own Chaos Management. It's an independent promotions company concentrating on getting songs played on radio. We've been operating now for nearly 30 years, I suppose, and I think you all agree we've had a time just by way of background, we had a time in the 80s where I think the last Ram magazine was in 1989, where there was 150 Australian bands that had success in the 80s, and there was bands playing at every corner. At the end of the 90s, there was 9 bands that had success. In the start of the 2000s, with the support of Triple J and a lot of other people, Australian independent music started happening. At the end of the 90s, you could not get played on the radio if you didn't have a distribution with a major record company. We're now at a time where independent record companies are probably making up for 30% of the global turnover of music, and we've got to the point, I think, certainly from my point of view, where we had a John Butler song played that actually became the first artist to be played that had independent distribution on commercial radio. That was really the breaking of the levee for a lot of that, and since then, in the last 10 years, I think you all agree that Australian music now is probably more back where it was in the 80s than it ever was before. Bands can now get played anywhere in the country, not subject to any of the ramifications about having a major record company or distribution. iTunes has opened all that up. Right now, one of my clients, Gautier, is sitting in America with the #1 for the 6th week in America and 20 countries where it's been #1 with an album that he made in his farmhouse at Merrick's.
Can we just give a round of applause for that? Jesus Christ. It's so amazing.
Wally, John Watson at 11 Music, who actually co-manages Wally with Danny Rogers, who also manages the Temper Trap, and he's on 11 Records, had everyone in the world telling Wally that he must edit that song. Most of the companies around the world wanted to take out the second verse, irrelevant to the fact that it would ruin the whole song. So we're in a position now where independent music and songs played on the radio. Now, Wally has just broken a rule at commercial radio. I've had 2 other previous #1s on commercial radio on the airplay chart with Ben Lee and John Butler. Ben Lee was played everywhere on all the commercial networks. John Butler was played everywhere on all the commercial networks. Wally's just gone #1 here last year with somebody I used to know. It was only played on Triple J, Nova and Austereo. Mix FM and 2Day FM, the Austereo stations, never touched the song. So here we are in a situation where, you know, we can get songs played on the radio, not played by everyone, but it can still satisfy, you know, get to the top of the chart. Our content in Australia now is 25% Australian. That's on commercial radio to be played between 24 hours a day. Yes, Joan? 24? No. Till midnight?
Till midnight.
Till midnight, 6 a.m. till midnight. Of that 25% of that has to be new, which means realistically 6.25% per year needs to be new Australian music. Now, of that 6.25%, it can actually be a song less than 12 months old. So theoretically, radio stations could play Gautier all day and satisfy the quota over a period of time. Now, the quota is there, which is, you know, it's probably not up to us to try and determine whether this quota should stay or go. It's really up to us to make sure that we're delivering music that's of the quality to compete against overseas records. Now, Gautier is an example of someone who's, you know, the last album should have been played, the song before this, Eyes Wide Open, should have been played, but this one has worked and it's been played. Now, when we look at charts and what's getting played on the radio, we're in a situation where it's hard for us to compete against American charts with Billboard and Music Week in the UK, where radio stations can play a song that's already had success. What we have to do is make our song good enough to compete against them. So the way to do that is to make sure when we do go out with a song that it's of comparative quality sonically and in the structure of the song. And then Wally has just proven, being #1 in over 20 countries, that you can do that. So I think to get ourselves to be part of being played on the radio station, it's all about delivering a song that's competitive.
Thanks, Russell. I'm sure there'll be some questions coming in later, but we'll keep kind of moving along and to Joan to hear some perspectives from the commercial radio industry.
Thank you, Kath. Yeah, thank you for having me here today. We work pretty closely with APRA on a number of things, so I'm happy to come to this sort of event and give you some facts, actually. I've got a couple of slides which we're going to just go through, which have got some stats on that you might find interesting about commercial radio. Can we have the first? Maybe we can have the next one. Okay. In terms of the code of practice for commercial radio, and let me point out here that the commercial radio sector is the only sector that has a quota, which is a bit of a bone of contention for us. And where you did hear probably some misreporting about what we said in our convergence review. So I'd like to, convergence review submission. So I'd like to clear that up now. There was a lot of distortion of our submission where people reported that we were lobbying, actively lobbying, to get rid of the Australian music quotas. Not true, didn't happen, hasn't happened, won't be happening. Our convergence review submission was simply saying, in an era of converged media, because what we were all supposed to be doing was saying, in an ideal converged world, what would regulation look like? We were actually saying there should be no regulation, not quotas in particular, but there should be no regulation. In relation to quotas, we said it was unfair that commercial radio is the only radio sector that has a quota. And also we were suggesting that the government have a look at some of our online competitors and music streaming services. Yes, that's a difficult thing to do, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't look at it. That to be fair and have a more level playing field, the government should look at some of those services and see if there's a way that they can require some sort of promotion. Not a quota perhaps, but some sort of promotion of Australian music and Australian artists. So that's the true position for commercial radio. We're not lobbying to get rid of the quotas. At the moment, we do have quotas. We have, actually we have in our codes 6 different formats that stations self-identify as. Now, the top 3, of course, are Category A, which is mainstream rock, top 40 alternative contemporary, and they're the ones that have the 25% quota. 20% is Category B, and 15% is soft adult contemporary Category C, and some other formats. Can we have the next slide? Now, in terms of adhering to our quotas, our members adhere to them very well. There are 47 stations that are considered Category A, or really, really high music stations. They're not all in metro, by the way. Some of them are in regional areas. 100% of those stations play more than 25% Australian music, and more than half of them play double the new Australian music quota. So remember, these quotas are a minimum, which are often exceeded, depending on, as Russell pointed out, the availability of commercially viable tracks and promotion of those tracks. Now, Category B, there are 74% stations that are Category B, 99% play more than the 20% required, and 66% play double the requirement for new Australian music. And of Category C, we have 111 stations, 98% play more than the 15% they're required to of Australian music, and 75% play 20% more of new Australian music. Now, of course, that category is a bit harder sometimes to find new Australian music. And as you go down the categories, you find it is harder to find Australian music. And talk stations don't have a requirement, naturally, to play a new Australian music quota. But networks such as 2Day and Nova often play 65 to 85% new Australian music within their quota. So the commercial radio stations take this seriously. It's a licence requirement. They cannot choose not to do it. They must do it to retain their licence, and they all do it. We have to report to APRA. We get their, what do they call them? Their discs, their census discs. So we know what, that's from their playout system. These figures are correct. So we are adhering to them. We exceed them quite often. Can we go on to the next one? Just to value that airtime, and you know, quotas are government, in effect, government intervention in programming on radio. That being said, we're not lobbying to get rid of them, but let's just have a look at the value of airtime that is mandated, that we give away. Remember that commercial radio only has one commodity, one way to earn revenue, that is advertising. And when we play on average, as I said, some stations play 25%, some play 20, some play 15, and they all play in excess of that. But when you look across all of the commercial radio stations, the average Australian music level of content that's played, taking into account all the formats, is 20%. So that's 1 in 5 songs is an Australian song. Now, we must play those between 6 a.m. and 12 midnight. They play Australian music midnight to dawn as well, as you would well know, but that is not counted in their quota. Now, that means that during 18 hours a day, there's a requirement to play, depending on your quota, but on average, they're playing 1 in 5 songs is an Australian song. The conservative value of that airtime, and it is conservative at the lowest average rate card, is $1.5 billion a year in commercial radio airtime that effectively is mandated that we give away. Now, let me say again, we are not lobbying to get rid of the quotas or to have them reduced. Plus, you have to add to that all the interviews and on-air promotion and promotion of concerts and all that sort of stuff that is part of the programming. But also, let's not forget that, yes, commercial radio needs music, but that's not all we do on commercial radio. That's not all we do on any radio, really, as Chris will agree, I think, that radio is more than just a jukebox. And in the US, the stations that are acting as jukeboxes are the ones that are under threat from the Spotifys and the radios and all of those music streaming services. Radio in Australia is very sophisticated and quite advanced. And of course, we have talk radio, sports radio. Talk radio in many cities is our highest rating station. And music stations, their highest rating shows are those where they have a personality. The Kyle and Jackie O's, whether you like them or not, they have a big following, but they don't play a lot of music in their show because their show is not specifically music per se. So radio is, you know, yes, people say to us, you need music to have a business. Yeah, we do, but radio is a lot more than playing music. And we're also local news, local traffic, local weather, all that jazz. Just to remind you as well that we do pay royalties. We pay over $21 million a year to APRA. We pay a percentage of our gross revenue, not profit.
What percentage is it?
Sorry?
What percentage is it?
APRA is between 3 and 4%. Now, remembering, of course, we pay more to APRA. Why? Because APRA represents all music. They don't just represent protected music. We pay less than 1% to the PPCA, who represent the record labels and the artists, but PPCA only collects, I wasn't intending to get into a discussion of copyright, but I'm happy to. PPCA only has the right to collect for what we call protected music. American music is not protected. So they have a much smaller right and a smaller repertoire for which they collect royalty from radio. Go on to the next. No, we pay less than the 1%. Much less than the 1%. So the record industry actually has the opportunity to get some hundreds of percentage increase already under the 1% cap. They haven't got it.
What do you mean?
Well, we pay 0.4% of gross revenue, and that's a negotiated fee with the PPCA. Now, they can get up to 1%, but they're not at that yet. So they still have the opportunity to get another... Sorry? Well, I think you need to know what you're talking about.
Yes, let's come back to that one later.
I think you need to know what you're talking about.
It's a 40-year-old rule that you guys give 1% to...
No, we don't give 1%. We have a cap of 1%.
But that's a 40-year-old rule.
Yeah, well, so are quotas. No. Look, if they want to take away the 1% cap, we've always said that's fine by us. But take away the regulation for music quotas as well. You can't have one thing and not the other. So sure, take away the 1% cap, but take away the quotas, and then we don't have any regulation and let the market decide.
Why would you not take away a 1% cap when it's clearly unfair?
Shall we come back to the issue? Because I'm sure...
I thought we were talking about Australian
I'm sure there's going to be some questions on this.
It's not.
On
Yes,
quotas and percentages.
It's related about, we're talking about the value of music and the relationship between commercial enterprise and culture. So that's why it's related.
It's a really critical issue, but it would be good too to get your comments, Claire, and Chris's comments, and then come back to it.
She only wants to talk about the 1% cap. Anyway, my last slide is about what we do for New Australian Music, which is our New Artist to Radio program. And we've been running that for 12 years. We give $1.3 million of airplay plus advertising. We're ramping it up this year, so it'll be bigger and better. We'll be making more announcements about that. And our 2011 winner was Nine Sons of Dan, who have had great success, I think, because of the radio support they've had. Anyway, that's my presentation.
Thanks for that, Joan. And I might just clarify that in terms of those percentages with both APRA and PPCA apply to all radio. And as Joan mentioned, commercial radio averages with APRA 3 to 4%. Community radio moves between different types of formats between 1.25 and 3.75. And ABC and SBS are also on a separate percentage system. With PPCA, it's 0.4% for both commercial radio and community radio. So I'm just clarifying what they are. Claire, tell us something of your perspectives, both as an artist and, of course, on the board of Music Victoria and APRA Ambassador.
I think, what have I got to say? I don't have any slides. I do like slides, though. I like the clarity of them. What I have to say is pretty simple. If any commercial enterprise wants to survive in the new world, my belief, which sounds naive but I think will be true and is proving itself to be true, is that they do have to have heart. They have to engage goodwill and know the possibility of what they're doing is beyond what they can gain commercially. And I think this is the general feeling that an artist like myself has about caps and quotas, is that at this stage they're still necessary. Coming into the digital age, they're still necessary because a strong culture is one that supports its artists. Because if we just have songs, if we just kind of sneak in with the quota by playing songs late at night or playing songs that sound American, what are we doing to actually support the broader arts culture in Australia? I think there is a way that commercial enterprise and cultural interests can hold hands and actually create more than just wealth for a few people. I'm a songwriter who's been writing songs since I was 3 years old. I've written thousands of songs. I've not had a song played on commercial radio, and I haven't needed to. So I'm not necessarily arguing for myself when I say this. But I believe good songs should be supported in a massive way, and I believe the timidity of commercial radio in playing the role that it should be playing in supporting Australian music has been shown up by the kind of role that Triple J have played in supporting Australian music. Pass.
Thanks for those comments, Claire. Chris, you've been with Triple J for quite a long time now, must be around a decade.
Yeah, about 10 years, I think.
Program manager, so a close relationship to looking at Australian material. Tell us a little bit about your perspective on things.
Yeah, well, I guess the broad perspective and the context that the ABC is in is that Joan's absolutely right. We don't have mandated quotas for Australian music content, but within the ABC Charter, there's a recognition there that the ABC is funded to support Australian culture and the performing arts, and as part of that, obviously, Australian music and culture as well. So at Triple J, we have a self-imposed quota of at least 40% Australian music on air. Over the last year and a half, we've been closer to 50%, and that's because there's just so much damn good music around at the moment of a high quality that's suitable for radio airplay. Some of the other ABC networks on some of the digital-only stations, ABC Jazz imposes a 25% Australian music quota. Dig, which has been around for a number of years now, has 40% quota as well. So there's that recognition, I guess, amongst all those platforms and all those networks that there needs to be, a lot of Australian content being exposed and given airplay across the stations. And look, Unearthed is probably a good example of something that's evolved over quite a number of years on Triple J. Originally as a bit of a demo comp, 5 or 6 years ago it evolved into triplejUnearthed.com, which is a platform for any artist to upload and maintain a profile for their music, have up to 3 songs online, and be there as a way for artists to find an audience, engage with each other, engage with music lovers, without actually needing that much intervention from the ABC or from Triple J. It's there also as a path to airplay, but it's also there as a way, for anyone who wants to discover music to delve through and actually find whatever music they want, generate playlists, whatever that is. And with technology like digital radio commencing in Australia, we were talking earlier, it's coming up to the 3rd anniversary of digital radio being available in the 5 capital cities, now Canberra as well. We look at technology like that, I guess, as an opportunity to do more of what we're here to do, and look at it as an opportunity to expose more Australian culture to the airwaves, I guess. So Unearthed was a bit of a... once the Unearthed site had been set up and there was so many artists, no one expected there to be that much Australian music out there of such a high quality, I guess, that...
I could have told you.
You could. We just need to ask Claire. There you go. There's over 30,000 artists on that site for varying degrees of quality. But even if, just 5 to 10% of that is, really well recorded, and it's cheaper and easier to record music at a high quality than it ever has been, and, at a good sort of songwriting level, then, there's enough there for a full-time 24/7 radio station to play that music. So we launched that the middle of last year, or actually it was October, so we're about 8 months into that station on air. Modest aims at first. At first we just wanted people to know about the service and come to it. Digital radio is still emerging in Australia. I think we're up to about 10%, 11% of the general radio listening audience is listening to digital radio. That's growing really, really quickly. There's more people listening to digital radio than streaming Australian stations online.
Yep.
That changed in the last couple of months, that people are really coming to digital radio. And we hope it is because of services like Triple J Unearthed, like Dig, like ABC Jazz, that you can't get if you've just got a normal analog radio. So the audiences for Unearthed so far are pretty small. It's still emerging. It's a challenging station for people to listen to. It's not just all Australian, it's all new Australian music. So you've really got to make that call to delve into and want to discover new music. We only see the figures, the audience figures, I guess, for the ABC stations, so we can't compare how Unearthed is going against some of the other digital-only stations that some of the commercial networks have launched. Amongst the ABC stations, it does very, very well. So, we're really happy with how it's heading. Again, the quality of music for anyone, and I encourage anyone, if you haven't listened to Unearthed, you can stream it online, obviously, as well, if you don't have a digital radio yet. The quality is astounding. There's so much good music out there coming through that service. And, all the other platforms as well. I don't want to make it sound like Unearthed is the only way that anyone can discover emerging Australian music. We're really lucky in Australia to have a really strong radio sector between the ABC, the commercial, and of course community radio, which is really, really strong in this country and really important as well. But Unearthed and Triple J offer a national platform, I guess, for new Australian music. So, overall we're happy with where it's at. We've just launched a couple of hosted programs on Unearthed. Originally it was more of a closer to a jukebox service with a lot of grabs and the artists themselves introducing their music. We've just launched a couple of hosted programs, again, to attract a new audience to that service. And, you know, hopefully find more ears you know, engaging with and getting exposed to Australian music that they might not have heard before. Yeah, but it's all pretty new. Digital radio, I think, has, you know, got a lot of opportunities, and I think it's really important that on digital radio, that I think it was really important that the Convergence Review actually reinforced that there needed to be those content quotas across digital radio for commercial radio, I guess, as well.
Thanks for those comments, Chris. Joan, one of the things that did come out of the Convergence Review, as well as their support for existing quotas, which commercial radio supports, was that be extended across other platforms, including digital radio. Do you have a particular view on that in terms of the Convergence Review comments? Not that, of course, what's in the Convergence Review is something that's necessary in practice. It's simply a review, and many of us would realise, given the current debates politically, that it may stay a review for quite some time.
Yeah, look, our only comment on that is the exemption for digital-only stations will be reviewed in another 2 years because they're part of our code, so it will be reviewed, and I think probably then we'll look at listenership figures. We put to the regulator at the start that because many of our members were experimenting with formats, and we don't know what's going to end up being on air. I mean, you mentioned Unearth. We've got Radar, of course, which Southern Cross Austereo runs and is unsigned artists. And now they're cross-promoting that, just like you cross-promote Unearth.
Although Radar doesn't just play unsigned artists, it plays mainly international artists. It's closer to Triple J than Unearth, I think.
Well, they would argue that the case with you on that, and they're not here.
You
So
can look
what
at the
they
site
tell
and see it
me,
pretty easily,
what they tell me is they play unsigned Australian artists and a lot of Australian
Listen
artists.
to them, Joan, they're lying.
And they also
they do play some, but it's just, yeah.
They also
Small
now
percentage.
have a thing with the AFL where they have a performance every half time, and they're starting to really rev that up and cross promote it from their analogue station on Triple M and 2Day. I think they have an hour, or you know, the 2Day Fox, an hour program every night with Radar. So highlights from Radar. So I mean, our view on the digital is it's early days yet for digital. And our networks are experimenting with all sorts of different formats, as the ABC is as well. We also have a pop-up station called Main Stage, which pops up for a visiting artist, or it was up for a month with AC/DC when they were touring Australia. And, you know, those sorts of stations have to be viewed differently. So when it's being reviewed in another couple of years, we'll be having a look at what the new digital-only stations are doing. Because, you know, and SBS, of course, is the same. They're doing a whole lot of experimentation. They've got Asia Pop, I think, as a digital-only station. So, you know, there might be some formats where an Australian music quota is not appropriate, but we thought when our codes were being reviewed at this very early stage that it was too early to accept that the quotas just automatically go on all digital-only stations. But we're open to a review of that. And the Convergence Review, you're quite right. You know, there's a lot of proposals in there. And my advice from the PM was that it's a medium-term issue, all of the issues that have been raised in that. So the government will be looking at all of those very carefully over the next 18 months, 2 years.
Also, yes. Look, I've got about 20 questions I could easily ask, but I want to make sure people in the audience have the opportunity to raise the issues that they see as important in relation to Australian music content. And so I'm going to throw it over to you. And we have microphones in the centre panel here that you'll need to come to ask your question. And I'm going to start, because I cut off the debate before, I'm going to start with the chap down here in the blue jacket. Sorry, I'm having trouble.
Bill Cullen, everyone.
If you could just pop over to the microphone so everyone can hear you.
Bill Cullen.
See a plant.
Management.
Is Bill there as a plant?
Hi. I've got just a couple of things I wanted to clarify with Joan. First, you said there should be no regulation. Commercial radio exists only because you are licensed to use public spectrum from the government, and I would have thought with that there should be a cultural responsibility. Not anybody can start up a commercial radio station That was one point. Next point, say that you provide $1.5 billion worth of airtime to music. Surely, like, you're valuing that airtime as if every second of every hour on radio is a commercial. It's not. Without music, music stations would not be able to sell advertising. Then you claim your NAR program helps Australian artists. One artist that's always wheeled out to say what a success the NRA program is an artist I manage, Sarah Blasco, who has never been played on commercial radio, so I don't understand how your new artist radio program is actually effective. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I'm glad you were listening to what I had to say, Bill.
Absolutely.
Regulation, as I said to you, the Convergence Review submission was a submission that covered a lot more than music. It also covered codes, etc., etc. Yes, we access public spectrum. So do the free-to-air TV, so do the communities, so do the ABC and SBS. Our proposal was really self-regulation rather than co-regulation, which is what we have.
You said there should be no regulation.
Oh yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, you don't want government regulation on anything.
Then we should all be able to start a radio station.
Sorry?
Then I should be able to start a radio station from my bedroom and use the public spectrum as well.
Well, if you could pay licence fees.
But to pay licence fees, that's regulation. You're just arguing against yourself.
Oh. Okay, Bill, I'm arguing against myself. But anybody in any business will tell you they want to see red tape cut and regulation cut in any business, not just commercial radio. And that's why we have so many red tape reviews across all sectors of business. So anyone in any business will tell you regulation is annoying because it tells you to do stuff and you have to do it. But we're realistic. We know that we will always have some form of regulation, just as we're always going to have some form of competition regulation and fair trading. Nobody likes anybody in business does not like regulation. So I'm making a general comment that, yeah, it'd be great to have no regulation. And that's what we were asked to do, talk about a converged world where regulation should be a level playing field.
She can dream, can't she?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
she can dream.
But isn't regulation necessary in order to...
I'm not going to get into a discussion of whether regulation is necessary
Why
or not.
not,
Of course, regulation is necessary
No,
for
but
all business.
Isn't regulation necessary because that's about ensuring that commercial enterprise isn't just about making money and fucking everyone else off? Isn't there a point? Like, isn't there a reason why, for example, there's regulation at the childcare centre to make sure that the children have 3 meals a day? There are other things in life than just making money.
Yeah, I think you're taking me too literally, really. I mean, I think you're
a powerful
purposely
woman, Joan, and I do take you literally.
purposely taking me too literally. But that being said, yes, there does need to be some form of regulation. What the Convergence Review was meant to do was to look at making it a more level playing field so that all media was subject to the same sorts of regulation. Now, the fact is that traditional media is subject to a lot more regulation than new media or converging media or new platforms. And our premise is, in an ideal world, there would be no regulation. Yes, you can dream. But in a realistic review of regulation, they should be trying to make it a level playing field and either reduce our regulation slightly or put some regulation on emerging platforms. So that's our position.
One comment about content that hasn't really been discussed is the television are rated on from 6 a.m. till 10:30 at night. We have a scenario where Australian content's rated from 6 a.m. till midnight. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are aware that, you may or may not be aware, that Southern Cross just bought Austereo. So effectively, they now own all the Austereo stations. But what really has happened is there's been almost a reverse takeover, where Austereo are now programming the Southern Cross stations. So where you had a CFM network with 45 stations across regional Australia, that is now being programmed out of Sydney. So where we had a multitude of areas to get songs played to come back to one to help build to get back into Sydney, now those Austereo stations are programming regional Australia, making them even more powerful. So what the Southern Cross Austereo have done is they've started Radar, and Radar now has gone in to be not only a digital platform, but it's now on after 10 o'clock at night till midnight, right across Southern Cross Austereo stations. There's Byron Cook, there's Ella Hooper from Killing Heidi, ex-Killing Heidi, there's all sorts of people now that program these shows. Now their content, I dare say I don't know the figures, but most of their Australian content is taken up between 10 p.m. and midnight. if we were to change the content to go from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m, I think commercial radio would probably struggle to find their 25% quota. Joan?
I disagree.
I'm sure there might be questions on that, and we'll go to the next question, who is already at the microphone.
Hello, I might be entering a can of worms here, but it's already happening. I've just been in France, and they have something like a 75% quota.
No, they don't.
And in Brazil, I know they have an 80% quota. They changed it in 15 years. They really turned it around from being mostly American music in the charts to being Brazilian music in the charts. Why on earth are we not talking of figures like this in Australia?
Well, let me give you the real figures for quotas.
But we do know that they're kind of strong cultures, aren't they? Like, yeah, we are. But we know that culturally there is a general feeling that if you're a French artist, you're supported by your government and by regulation.
But they did turn it around in Brazil. It
That's
can
right.
be done.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm saying is that's why we know them as strong cultures, because they have these quotas.
Can I tell you what the quotas actually are, the mandated quotas? US, of course, has no quota. There's no quota in the UK, Denmark, Spain, Finland, Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Bulgaria. I don't know about Brazil, but I'll look into that. New Zealand has a 20% voluntary quota. Canada has 35%, but only of popular music, and at least 10% of special interest musical selections, so that's Indigenous music. France, 40% is French language, has to be French language music on French radio. Hungary, stations receive discounts on their copyright fees if they play Hungarian music.
It's handy.
That could be worth talking about. So they're the real quotas.
It was interesting at the last Big Sound conference. There were some people there from an organisation called New Zealand Air, and that was introduced after they abandoned quotas in New Zealand. And apparently, and I hadn't known this, apparently after they abandoned quotas in New Zealand, the airplay for New Zealand music went to 4% in terms of commercial media.
I'm absolutely shocked.
And so that was an interesting thing in relation to the functionality of quotas in relationship to commercial media. In terms of community media, that's always, of course, had high levels. Other questions from the audience? Sure. Could you come over to the microphone, please, so everyone could hear?
Can I just say, Kath, that's shocking, but we are not lobbying to get rid of quotas.
Absolutely.
So,
but that is what happens. It's no one's fault that happens.
Yeah, it's just interesting that that's what happens.
Quotas are a pain in the arse, but they're there for a reason.
The other thing, and this relates to comments from Chris, is that there are the mandated quotas, Joan, that you were referring to, on which commercial radios support, but there's also the codes of practice, which are a non-mandated framework. To our next question.
Hi there. I guess the fear is that if there wasn't a quota in place, that commercial stations would play a much reduced percentage of Australian music. That's the fear. So can anyone on the panel speak to why is it that Australian music, or that American music or imported music is going to help the station rate better, sell there, add time for more money?
I'll field this one, mate. It's a business. The reality is Australian music isn't coming with the research and the charts and all this sort of stuff that they're inevitably playing songs that have already been proven in other markets. So it's easy for a radio station to play a song that's going to work for their audience, but by its success somewhere else. We have to be as competitive in creating our own demand for the song to compete at that level of airplay. It's a business at the end of the day, and they're trying to make money like everyone does. So really, we've got to up our game to give them the figures and the stats they need to be played at the same time.
So considering an artist like Gautier now has had a massive hit, his next release, whatever it's going to be, is going to get guaranteed airplay on commercial radio.
We've already been out with another song called I Feel Better in the last 4 months ago, and it went back to somebody. It's already come and gone. The first song off that album, Eyes Wide Open, only got played by Chris, only got played by no commercial radio touched it.
So even after a massive international hit, it's still
even after. There's no such thing as any guaranteed airplay, no matter who you are on the next song. None.
Wow.
Except for new artists to radio.
Where
Guaranteed
new artists to
airplay.
radio, I've had a couple of winners of this. They get played from December, whatever it is, December 1 till January 16th, over 6 weeks on the main commercial networks in a non-rating period. In a non-rating period, the 6 weeks of airplay.
I've just got a question to follow on to that. Is there, or should there be a responsibility for commercial radios to actually, I mean, obviously the people look up, especially the younger generation, look up to artists that commercial radio plays. Mm-hmm. Now, is it possible maybe, if there was a shift in, sort of a paradigm shift in the music that got played, that people suddenly go, oh, well, this is now popular, maybe I'll like this.
This is what we've recently learned about, you know, in the field of neuroplasticity and the way that our brains work. It is commercial culture who are training the culture to like something. So if you keep playing American music, of course that's what the kids are going to want to hear, because that's the way we work as human beings. But if we proudly play music that is intelligent, is not necessarily just talking to the lowest common denominator, and you know isn't always easy, if we just can kind of squeeze in some songs that actually have substance as well, which occasionally happens, and which is exactly what happened with Gautier. Why do you think that song went off? Because it was great and it meant something to a whole lot of people. It wasn't just plastic. So we know that there is, of course, a role that commercial radio and all radio stations and all culture plays in training its audience.
Everything's researched. You've got to understand that a lot of the radio stations follow an old theory by a guy from America called Zapolian. His theory was, if you play a song 200 times, it has a chance to embed, and we can see whether the radio station would play it. So if you're going to play it 200 times, that means playing it 3 times a day, 7 days a week for 10 weeks. Radio stations here would be lucky to play a song, even if they have added a new Australian song, 80 times. Then it's literally a phone out to, well, Nova don't even do the phone out now, a call out research where they'll get them either in an auditorium to 500 people and give them coffee and donuts and $80
I've
and
never
say,
been invited.
Listen to,
anyone here ever been invited?
Listen to these 500
Seriously?
songs, and they'll play the chorus and I'll give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down. They'll then take
Who are these people?
Then they'll take this research back and they'll go,
Shoppers.
that's fucked, that's gone. So even if you do manage to get played on commercial radio, and after your 80 spins, they don't like you, you're gone.
So I'd then ask, why do you think commercial radio is actually important for Australian artists? Why do we need you?
Are you asking me that?
Sure, why not?
Are you asking me that?
Yes.
Yes. Well, let me reiterate once again, we play Australian music, we play Australian music quotas, we exceed those quotas.
Reluctantly, it seems.
We exceed those quotas. No, I didn't say reluctantly. I don't think I ever said reluctantly.
You didn't say.
In fact,
I'm just saying that's how it's. That's
well,
a general feeling.
you know,
I
you've got to
get.
be careful of making general statements.
He wants you to smile more, Joan, and if you smile more...
Happy to smile.
I'll go home happy if you smile.
Although I thought we were talking about Australian content. What was your question? Why are we important? Well, because we have the majority of the audience. Yeah, we're important. But don't forget, as I said, that we do more. Yeah, music is important, but we do more than play music as well on radio and on commercial radio.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. I mean, commercial radio is still incredibly important for Australian music, which is, you know, why the quotas are there and why they're so important to maintain those levels of Australian music.
But we want them to be a charity.
Claire, you mentioned before that you've never had any airplay on commercial radio. Can you just add to that a bit more in terms of, you've got a reasonably high profile in the Australian music industry?
Yeah, look, it wasn't that I didn't try. I slept with every music program I could find, and just no luck. Marty was, my husband manages me, and he was totally fine with that. And that's the kind of lengths that we'll go to as artists in Australia. But the truth is, for me, I've written music that isn't traditionally bubblegum. Yeah. And not that I'm saying all commercial radio is bubblegum, but generally, you know, commercial radio is functional. It's there to be played in any setting, from what I can gather. So it needs to be applicable to, you know, it needs to be able to wake you up at 4:30 a.m. from the building site next door. And that wasn't my kind of music. So for me, as an artist, fortunately, we had ABC Radio and we had community radio, and that's how I was able to forge my career. And I think that is an anomaly. I know that's an unusual scenario to still be sort of standing here after 5 albums without commercial radio
If you
play.
had a song, Claire, that was played on commercial radio,
Yeah.
would you do everything to support it?
Would I do everything to support
Would you
it?
go on and do the interviews with the radio stations? Would you go?
Joan knows. I've
She's
done
already
done
slept
them
with
all.
everyone. I think
You know,
the
I've
answer
slept
is
with
yes.
everyone. I've got, you know, I've been in the boardrooms. I've played like my.
Do you still aspire to get played though, or have you
I've
given
never
up?
aspired to get played. I think it
Well,
would
why
be.
not though?
No, I've never aspired to get played only because I think it would be a wonderful thing to get played, but I don't aspire to get played because it's not. It's so outside of my control. If you aspire to get played on commercial radio, you have to change the way you write music. I don't think Wally didn't
You think
aspire.
Wally's sold out making that song? I mean,
Wally
that's
and I-
what you're saying
it's
there.
not at all what I'm saying, Russ. Wally and I were writing songs together this time last year. He had no aspiration. He had no plan to be on commercial radio because you can't plan for those things. But you can certainly keep writing good songs. And if that happens, it happens. If the decision makers make that decision, great. But you don't want to change who you are. That is why Wally is the exception. He could never have written that song if he was trying to write it for commercial radio.
Well, no
Wally
one can.
would
If you're
never.
writing a song for radio now, you probably aren't.
But
Because radio, as Chris and I were talking earlier, pop is now alternative.
Yeah,
and pop itself, in the old word of pop, is dead.
We'll see. You know, these things come and go.
Yeah.
But I guess the point that I'm making is who can predict trends? Nobody can. You keep writing music. Your question was, do I feel aspire? I don't aspire. I would love it, and you know what? It'll probably happen one day for me. There'll probably be a radio station for 84-year-old females who are still making music, and I'll get a fucking number
And
one.
then she can just go back. Then you can go back to your husband.
Look, there's time for just a couple more questions. Can I go to the chap in the white T-shirt at the middle microphone?
This is probably just up for discussion, but I think it's pretty obvious that Triple J have like a really good model going, and they support Australian music in a really, really great way. So what I'm wondering is, and the main thing that comes through from that station is that they're about the music. So why aren't people with a commercial mentality trying to tap into something like that?
Because they're paying over $100 million for a license.
Yeah. So is there barriers to people being able to do that? What are they? And I'm just wondering, why isn't it happening?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to comment on the business strategy of commercial radio stations, but obviously they've got to find a niche in the market where they're going to get enough of an audience to attract advertisers to pay them to allow them to stay on air. And, you know, they do research, as Russell says. They research their listeners. And if their listeners say, don't like that, then they don't play it, because listeners will desert a radio station if they start playing music they don't like. I mean, I can tell you a story that I was told. I won't mention the network, but they ran a hip-hop station for a while.
Word.
And they had an Australian music quota, because they were a high music station. This is a few years ago. And they kept having listeners calling in saying, stop playing that Australian hip-hop. We're listening because we want to hear, you know, whoever I don't listen to hip-hop, so I don't know who they are. Jay-Z? I don't know. Do they do that? Anyway, whoever they are, Snoop Dogg. Is that not right? 50 Cent? I don't know. So they found the audience will react very quickly to commercial radio formats. They'll react to personalities, as we know. They'll turn off if somebody leaves a radio station because they don't want to listen to whoever's replacing them. So it is a business, you know, and I know commercial seems to be a dirty word, but these are businesses, and they have to find an audience that will stay with them, that then attracts advertisers. If you play something, you know, and this hip-hop station found that out quite quickly, and they changed their format after about 12 months.
So if we go back one step, the licence fees are a necessity. Like, why do you pay the licence fees? Where does that money go? Why do you pay
It goes to the regulator. It goes to the regulator. So we rent the spectrum, essentially.
And who makes the money out of that?
The government.
The government.
Yeah. And we pay on average.
Australian people.
But and then they pay it back to the ABC. So,
and then
we're
get a
supporting
career.
the ABC.
Here's the truth, though. You know, the commercial radio have had a really strong kind of monopoly on audience for a really long time, because they're the ones who've been renting the space, and that's been the scenario. And commercial radio are, of course, thinking ahead to the future. I'm assuming, of course. and how commercial enterprise will play itself out in the years to come. But in the digital age, we can already see, look, Imogen Heap, you know, she's never been played on commercial radio. Look at the kind of career that she has. There's all these interesting places that artists can go. You know, commercial radio is not what it was. It doesn't have the stranglehold on power anymore that it does. So
why can't it
just
just be...
So then we don't need to have
Just
quotas.
bear in mind, though, every time you
You don't need us to play the quotas then, because we're not as influential.
I'd love you to, Joan.
Okay.
every time you play it on commercial radio, an artist makes money.
Yeah.
You're actually being paid when you be the artist for being played on commercial radio. It goes into a big pot of money that is gathered at the end of the year. At the end of the year, those get played most on the radio. The money in the pot's divvied out accordingly.
Are we talking about 1% cap here? Are we entering?
It just seems like the musicians, like the product is the music, but the musicians sort of, I think, sort of come last. They're not making the money.
So imagine if we were at the movies. You know, this is a scenario that PPCA. It's a good scenario. So imagine if you went to the movies, and you were told that the movie maker, the person who made the movie and funded the movie, was only allowed to have 1% of the profits that cinema was making. It's an absurd scenario. Why do we expect the same for musicians? Word.
Look, can I comment?
Let me
Can I
hear
just
it.
make a
Come on.
comment? And this will be my last comment on this, because I'm not here to debate. We're in court with PPCA, as you know. PPCA collects money for protected music only. Now, how do they distribute that music? You know, I'm sick of commercial radio being made out to be the bad guy. We pay our APRA and PPCA fees. The PPCA distributes that money in the following proportions. Now, they're so concerned about Australian artists. 38% is kept by the record label. 38% only goes to Australian artists. I think 25% is admin cost, which is much higher than the APRA admin cost, by the way, which I think is only about 11 cents in the dollar.
Yeah, but APRA have a much larger pool to draw from.
Which means they've got to distribute
It's a percentage.
They've got to distribute it much further as well. They're not just distributing it to a small
But no,
group.
they have more revenue, far more revenue than PPCA.
Revenue,
That's why the percentage of admin costs are higher.
Distribute it to.
Yeah, that's right, but they still...
And the other thing is, let's not forget that the ABC has a cap as well. It's not only commercial radio that has a cap. The ABC has a cap of 0.5 cent per head of population, which is much, and that's fine. We have no view on that, except that we're tired of hearing about the commercial radio cap, and we never hear a word about the ABC cap.
But it's...
Yes, they are. Yeah. Well, they lost that fight recently.
They'll keep fighting.
I'm under...
Gross.
Of its
revenue.
gross.
Gross, not profit. Yeah, but also let's tell
Can I
the full
just
story.
interrupt you, because other people can't hear without sort of microphones, but
can I just
Joan,
say,
I'm
let's
going
tell.
to give you a
Can I
final
just say,
comment on that cap.
let's tell the full story. PPCA only has the right to collect for a very limited repertoire. APRA collects.
Because in other industries, and it's in the Copyright Tribunal, it's been deemed that PPCA collects about 80% of work. When it came to the fitness industry Copyright Tribunal, that was how the rate was discounted, was to 80%.
PPCA does not collect for American music.
Correct.
Very limited repertoire then.
But it's also the definition of what is non-protected music is more complicated than just American music.
Not really.
It is complicated, but Joan, you were going to make a sort of broader comment than that, I think, rather than a specific.
Oh, was I?
That's what
I
I
wasn't
thought.
really. No, you caught me on the hop there.
Can I just make a quick comment just from
Absolutely.
the original point that the last person asking a question was making? I actually think there is a real opportunity there for a commercial network to make a stand and play better music, more Australian music.
Better music?
You know?
You're making a judgment on what listeners want to hear now.
Oh,
Better
well, just tell them the truth.
Yeah,
Joan.
well, hang on. I'm
Better
just trying to get
music.
away
That's
from the fact that Australian music isn't worse than music from other nations.
I don't think anyone said it was, Chris.
Well, isn't that
Why don't you play
implied in the way
80%?
that there needs to be quotas to be able to play
Did anyone say
music
it was
in the
worse?
first
I
place?
don't remember anyone saying it was worse.
Well,
No,
you
you
didn't
just-
use that word, but that's what's
I've
implied
not
through the
even
whole
alluded
resistance.
in any way to Australian music being
Okay, well then play more of it then.
bizarre.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, if we had some taxpayer funding, we
Chris.
probably would.
A final comment?
Ooh, bang.
Hang
Left
on. I thought
hook.
we took that money from you, Joan. I thought
Well,
we took
you
that
do
from your
take it.
licence
And
fees.
from my taxes.
Of course.
We have to wind up.